Welcome to the Rejuvenate podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Hawks, and I'm here with my co-host, the creator and founder of Genetic Insights and Feel Younger, Elwin Robinson. And we are continuing the conversation for the Rejuvenation Blueprint. We've already discussed steps 1 through 4, and now we're continuing steps 5, 6, and 7. So here we go.
Thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, let's get into it.
Well, let's move on to step 5. Elwin, please introduce step 5 of the Rejuvenation Blueprint.
So step 5 is lifestyle and environmental cell signaling instructions. So we've kind of started from the inside out when it comes to cells, right? With step 1, we talked about the very inside, the very core, which is the genetic code. Then we started talking about the nutrients and toxins, which are within the cell or bathing directly around the cell. Then we've gone out a little bit more to the hormones and neurotransmitters, which are kind of giving instructions to the cell, but they're still within the body. And we talked about adjusting those within the body, probably by, taking various things to either increase or reduce various different things. But now we're actually going even further outside to the outside of the body. This is the first time we've focused there. So do you see, we're really working from the inside out so far. We're going to change that structure a little bit for the last two, actually. But the first 5 steps are really starting right at the core, going outwards. So this is all the stuff that people talk about, which is absolutely accurate, and which maybe some people have accused me of not talking about enough. And the only reason I don't do it is because I feel like so many people already do it. Yes, definitely in the alternative health world, but even in the mainstream world to some degree, they do pay at least lip service to these kind of things. But this is all the stuff that absolutely is crucially important. So I'll mention a few of them. Sleep is one of them, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier. Sleep is absolutely crucial to the optimal operation of the machine of your body, the energy producing capacity of your body. Doesn't matter how optimized your nutrients and building blocks are, doesn't matter how toxin free you are, and it doesn't matter how optimal your hormones are even, you won't have to go that long with sleep deficiency before all of that goes out of the window. The nutrients that you had such perfect levels of will soon become depleted. The toxins that you had totally under control will soon start building up. And the hormones that are all perfectly balanced will soon start becoming imbalanced if you do not have optimal sleep for even, a moderate period of time. Even a few weeks of severe sleep deprivation will start throwing all of that out of balance in a otherwise very healthy person.
And why would you say that is? Is it because there's our body during that sleep process, there are so many processes that it has to get through to be able to, optimally function, that by not getting great sleep, then we're not allowing our body that time to rest and recuperate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's probably, out of everything we've talked about before, I'd say step 3 is probably the most important. It really is a crucial time for your body to clean house. And that's actually true even psychologically. We talked about physically so far, right? That process of, and in fact, that's what sleep really is. It's a process of, deep sleep, which is more, my understanding is it's more for the body. That's where everything goes into a kind of semi-dormant state, and the cleanup process can really go full throttle without any interference. So out of the total energy allocation, the amount needed for you to function minimizes, right? Even the core temperature goes down, which means the mitochondria are slowing down. Like everything, the nervous system isn't active, the digestive system isn't active as much, the immune system isn't active as much, the circulatory system isn't active as much, the respiratory system isn't active as much. Everything kind of slows down significantly, except that cleanup detoxification process. So I think that's a big one. And then the dreaming part of the sleep, the REM part of the sleep, is more for psychological reasons. But even that I look as a kind of detoxing, clearing house, but on a more emotional, psychological level. The function of dreams from just a purely materialistic, scientific point of view is for you to help process and deal with all those things that you struggle to deal with, whether they're traumas or just surprises, confusions, overwhelm, all of that kind of stuff. Your body processes and deals with all that stuff. And so when you don't sleep, your body starts to have more and more of a backlog of toxicity, and your brain, your emotions start to have more and more of a backlog of psychological issues. And depending on where you have more of a weak link, that lack of sleep will show up wherever that is. So meaning, if you are quite physically strong, then it might be more likely to show up in you starting to go a little bit crazy. And if you're more mentally strong, emotionally strong, then it might show up in you getting ill. But it'll show up in one of those two places because of that lack of being able to do that job. Other, crucial lifestyle factors are exercise. I don't talk about that enough, but it is very, very important to move. We are designed to move. We're not designed to be sedentary in any situation other than, illness, right? So if you're really ill, then you're meant to be to rest. But otherwise, you're meant to be on your feet and moving around for at least several hours a day. You're also designed to be strongly exerting yourself at least some of the time in most situations. Again, unless you're sick, unless you're recovering. I'm talking about, running, climbing, fighting, picking stuff up, anything that's, like quite a bit of exertion that gets your heart racing and gets your lungs really going and all the rest of it. There's a huge amount of disagreement in the fitness world and in the health and longevity world about exactly the right amount, but I think what everyone agrees with is at least a bit, at least a little bit of that, at least a little bit of extreme exertion, at least some of the time, even if it's only once or twice a week, and at least a moderate amount of not extreme exertion. So walking being the best possible example of that, but swimming, whatever, any other kind of light exercise would go in that category as well as being very, very important. Light exposure is something that is becoming really popular. I would say in the last 10 years, I'm seeing it in the alternative world, but it has a lot of scientific studies behind it. I would not consider it to be like one of those fads. I would consider it to be very grounded in science. That red light versus blue light ratio is very, very important, and that a lot of health problems come from having excessive blue light, especially in relation to red light. I think we're going to want to do an episode on this at some point fairly soonish about light as a nutrient. I'm counting it as an outside thing right now, but that's kind of arbitrary. It could even be in the deficiencies category, honestly, light. That's what it's looking like. So infrared light, near infrared light, and red light seem to have this very healing, anti-stress, mitochondrial energy promoting kind of function to them that's very important. UVA light, although it is very damaging, it's toxic. It's in excess, it is really bad. It counts as number 3. Some amount of UVA certainly is beneficial. One of the things it does, for instance, is it oxidizes vitamin A, which we've talked about before. UVB light is the type of light that stimulates vitamin D3 production. So that's crucial. The dreaded blue light that everyone's always talking about how bad it is actually very good when you first wake up in the morning. It gets your cortisol going. It gets your metabolism actually fired up, because it tells your body it's daylight now, it's daytime, it's time to get stuff done. So it is an energizer. The problem with blue light is we have too much of it in relation to red, and we have it at night, which is not natural, because until like 100 years ago, that wouldn't even be possible. Even, candles and firelight and all the rest of it that we had up until recently was much more in the red spectrum. So we just have way more blue light than we would have had before. But yeah, so the ratio of those things is very important. And it affects the circadian rhythms and all that kind of stuff. Stress, of course, everyone talks about stress. Even mainstream medical professionals are aware of the negative impacts of stress. And that rates a little bit more to 0.7. So I'll probably wait for that. But what does stress mean? I would say in a very simple level, I've taught for a long time that stress is not really something that happens to you. It's how you respond to things. And that's technically true. But if we were to think of stress as a lifestyle and environmental factor, what I would call stress is just an excess of something. So this could be an excess of noise, an excess of light, an excess of activity, an excess of stimulation. It's just too much of something, an excess of confrontation, an excess of loneliness, an excess of... So none of those things are bad. There's nothing wrong with being on your own. There's nothing wrong with confrontation. There's nothing wrong with light. There's nothing wrong with noise. But it's when you have too much of any of those things, right? That's when there's an issue. And so, yeah, it's an excess of a stimuli beyond the level that you're able to successfully adapt to it. It could be an excess of cold, excess of heat, et cetera, et cetera. Not that there's anything wrong with cold, but if it's too much and too long.
Yes.
Not that there's anything wrong with heat, but if it's too much and too long. So do you see what I mean? So that's the way I look at stress these days. Stress is partly how you respond to it. Like you can, through the power of your will and your mind, you can, have a very widely different response to so-called stressors. So one person, the tiniest little thing will have them be overwhelmed and upset and traumatized. For another person, it's absolutely no big deal. They don't even notice. So there is certainly that. But there is the case that everyone, if you could put another stressor on them, too much intense noise, too much intense light, too much intense heat, too much intense cold, et cetera, et cetera. Different people have different thresholds, but everyone has eventually a threshold where it's too much. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And let me ask you this, because with this being the external, outside of the body, these are all impacting potentially 2, 3, 4 of this blueprint. So I want to ask, what is the chicken and egg? Are 2, 3, and 4 out, and then we're not doing enough of these, or is it we're not doing enough of, we're not getting great sleep? Like how would somebody, when they're looking at the trying to figure out whether it's step 5 or whether it's something else, what would they just be tagging it like, okay, no, I'm not sleeping. I'm not getting great sleep. So maybe that is affecting my hormones. Let me go also check my hormones, or try and get to the root cause of why they're not sleeping. Or if there's like, I'm definitely not moving. Okay, I need to move more. How would they really or maybe this is going to be later when you, after we go through all of them, you'll help us identify how to really to identify the steps.
Yeah, I mean, it is case by case. So yeah, let's save that to the end, because it is case by case, but there are a few kind of general if-thens I can give you to help you to narrow it down. Yeah, and then the last one on my little list here of environmental facts would be damage. So in terms of stress, I talked about just things that are that would be fine, but just if they're excessive, right? But then there's damage, right? What about if you have a concussion? What about if you break something? What about if you burn something, right? These are not technically toxicities, but they are absolutely going to negatively impact you and can absolutely shorten your lifespan, can lead to premature aging, can reduce the quality of your life. If you remember, we talked about earlier about the immortal cell and what stops it being immortal. So that damage is another part of it. And so that damage can be caused by toxins, in which case I class it more under number 3, but it's not necessarily, right? Could be caused by, as I said, a blow to the head or being in an accident or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Or there's infections or certain things like that can cause actual damage to our skin and things so on and so forth. So yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense, having damage here. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I just need to take a moment to quickly tell you about a way that you can support the podcast by getting high quality, affordable supplements that Elwin and I personally use, and that's Feel Younger. What I love about Feel Younger is they have great quality products with minimal fillers, but the prices are very affordable. You can call their customer support team 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and in my experience, they're really helpful and friendly. And what I love most of all is the amazing descriptions Elwin's written for each product category about that topic. There's so much information and education on it. I've actually learned more from reading their product descriptions than I have from most articles. So, to support the podcast, please use Feel Younger for all your supplement needs. And to let them know we sent you, you can use promo code RejuvenateMe for a 20% discount off your first order at feelyounger.net. That's 20% off your first order with promo code RejuvenateMe at feelyounger.net.
Well, yes, but that leads us perfectly to number 6.
Well, perfect. Elwin, introduce us to step 6 of the Rejuvenation Blueprint.
So pathogens are number 6. So pathogens are, funnily enough, the whole kind of basis of the current medical system. So there was the whole argument, I think it was about 150 years ago, between two scientists, and they weren't really philosophers, but I guess they're most famous in a way for the fact that they each pushed a philosophy and that one of them eventually won. So there was Pasteur, who pushed the philosophy that disease is caused by an infectious agent that comes in and through the combination of really various things that we talked about, maybe it depletes building blocks that you need, maybe it excretes excess toxins, which then damage your system, and maybe it also interferes with hormones and neurotransmitters and stuff like that. But through those basic mechanisms, really, a pathogen comes in and it destroys your health. And then you have your immune system, which is viewed through this model as a kind of army, which is there to defend your body. And if the army is not capable of defending you, that's when you then get an infection, you get a disease, and that's what will kill you. Now, the reason I said 150 years ago is because that's very important, because 150-ish years ago, I don't know the exact date, and of course they were active for a while, but 150-ish years ago, the profile of the top 10 things that killed people was completely different. There was way more infectious diseases back then, and so that and again, was the cause of a lot of those infectious diseases exactly the same stuff we just talked about, like nutritional deficiencies, toxic excesses? Maybe. And so that's the other side of the coin. So the other philosophy being pushed, a guy called, I think it's pronounced Bouchamp, and he said, no. The issue is not these pathogenic bacteria. The issue is not these evil invaders that our defending armies have to try and keep out. The issue is the terrain of our body. The issue is the state of our body. Basically, the stuff I've just talked about. The lack of nutritional building blocks, too much of different toxicities build up, imbalances and levels of things like hormones and neurotransmitters. That's really the issue. And so if we get our terrain in a healthy state, then we don't have to worry about those pathogenic invaders, infections. They're no big deal. And so that's, as I said, before modern medicine in its current form really existed. That was the philosophical clash.
Aren't they kind of both right, though?
Well, yeah. So, but here's the important point. Pasteur won, right? So the word pasteurization, that came from him. So that was one of his big pushes to, with milk and various other things, to heat them up to kill all the bacteria in there. Now, you got to understand, Pasteur's philosophy is kind of a little bit disliked by some in the alternative health field, especially the kind of people who push all you have to do is eat well or eat my way and you won't have any health problems kind of people. They're not really big on Pasteur's philosophy. But as you said, he was kind of right. One of the big things that Pasteur's philosophy led to was the act of physicians washing their hands, which led to a massive reduction in the amount of children who died during or shortly after childbirth. Because before that, doctors used to handle dead bodies all the time and then go and help women give birth. And of course, we're introducing all kinds of unpleasant pathogenic organisms to infect the baby and the mother as well. So this was not a bad philosophy, I don't think. I think it was great. And as I said, I'm not totally against antibiotics. Most people in the alternative health world are. I think there is absolutely a place for them. And also, as I've talked about before, the line between food, supplements, and drugs is pretty arbitrary to me. Like, there are some things that, is turmeric a food or is it a supplement? Depends. If you put it in a curry, it's a food. If you put it in a capsule, it's a supplement. Is vitamin B1 a supplement or is it a drug? It depends. If you put it in capsule and sell it in the form of thiamine hydrochloride, it's a supplement. If you put it in a capsule and sell it in the form of benfotiamine in many countries, then it's a drug. And that's not just true for B1, it's true for, there's versions of B3, which are classed as drugs. There's versions of K2, which are classed as drugs. So anyway, there's numerous supplements which are like probiotics, or which are bacteria, or the byproducts of bacteria. Well, ivermectin, rapamycin, I think fenbendazole, like common pharmaceutical drugs, are just the byproducts of bacteria, So anyway, I don't draw those lines. And certainly the line between penicillin versus oregano oil versus garlic, people say that penicillin is bad because it's an indiscriminate antibiotic that kills loads of bacteria that you may actually want. That's also true of garlic. That's also true of oregano oil. That's also true of grapeseed extract. They don't all kill the same thing, but the point is they're all fairly indiscriminate, broad spectrum antibiotics. And some of them are even more broad spectrum, like an oregano oil is also killing, lots of different funguses. It's killing lots of different yeasts, etc. So anyway, I'm not against things that kill pathogens, unlike a lot of people in my world. And I think it is true that there was a significant reduction in people dying of infectious diseases after Pasteur really popularized that idea. He didn't discover bacteria, but he did popularize it. And I think hygiene is good. And you can see, countries that still are not really on top of hygiene in the world, they still have a lot of issues related. A lot of people do die of infectious diseases, dysentery and diarrhea and all that kind of stuff that just doesn't really happen in countries that are focused on hygiene. So I agree with you, Chrissy. They're both right. Pasteur is right. However, modern medicine, because antibiotics were such an amazing thing, they were so effective. People who used to just die from tooth infections and, lung infections and all the rest of it, suddenly you just give them the pill and they'd stay alive. I mean, that was a miracle. But whenever you discover something that's so effective, you tend to kind of, most of the time, human beings tend to overemphasize it. And so there came to be a philosophy of all we have to do is just kill these things and then don't worry about it. So no longer was there any question about, well, why are you getting infected? And we've just seen this with the recent pandemic. We've seen that, the vast majority of people who were affected were, yes, elderly, but other than that, they were people with a bunch of comorbidities. They probably had insulin resistance. They were probably overweight. They probably, had a bunch of the stuff that we've already talked about. And no one was asking the question, why are these people dying when they get this infection that most people seem to be fine with? They were just pushing their drugs, as they always do. And of course, the emphasis has gone a little bit away from antibiotics and a little bit more towards prevention with the V word, but which we won't talk about in this channel. It's too controversial. But the point is, all these things may be valid, but they're just incomplete, as you said, Chrissy, because both sides are relevant. If you have an infection, maybe it's useful to take something to kill it. If you don't want to get an infection, maybe it's useful to take something to prevent it. But the other side of the coin is, what about preventing it by looking at the health of the organism in general? And so the immune system is a big part of this. We haven't talked about the immune system really in this episode. So a lot of the time, the immune system, so in the past, say 150 years ago, throughout most of evolution, the problem was probably that the immune system was not effective against the infection. The problem, it wasn't strong enough. And that lack of strength was probably more than anything down to nutritional deficiencies. I've seen studies and graphs about this, and even the idea that infectious diseases went away because of antibiotics is disputed. Some people say it is because of simple hygiene and resolution of very common nutritional deficiencies that used to be common until relatively recently. But these days, you're more likely to have an issue of your immune system killing you than an infection killing you. So both in the context of an infection. So, for instance, most of the people who are dying with the recent pandemic, it was actually their immune system that was it was the overreaction of the immune system to the infectious agent that was more a problem than the infectious agent itself. And that's not exclusive to any recent pandemic. That's actually often and generally the case, that the immune system overreaction is worse than the infection itself. And then, of course, the other part of it is that over the last 100 years, we went from autoimmunity being a thing that barely existed to being a thing that is a pandemic, you could easily say. Like a vast amount of people are suffering with various different forms of autoimmunity. And that's with the strict definition of autoimmunity that is often used. I would say if you broaden autoimmunity to any situation where your immune system is creating illness in your body unnecessarily, then I would include in that allergies and intolerances and sensitivities.
Constant chronic inflammation, and the body's just trying to deal with it.
Absolutely. And yet that's not even counted as an autoimmunity. So the immune system overreaction to things is a huge deal, whether it's overreaction to a genuine infectious agent or whether it's a overreaction to something else that it shouldn't have an issue with but does, whether it's peanuts, gluten, dairy, whatever, or whether it's a reaction to a toxin, which is not really talked about, but I think actually the fundamental issue, the most important issue. And so whereas Pasteur saw the immune system as like an army defending you from invasions, the Beauchamp system was more seeing the immune system as the cleanup crew of the body. That they're more like garbage workers than an army. That would be, or cleaners, or maybe plumbers, or something like that. More along those lines of keeping the garbage from, making sure the garbage keeps flowing away and doesn't build up through various different mechanisms, like the lymphatic system, for instance. And so, I think that both are accurate. Obviously, I do, because as we talked about, points 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all really and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all really terrain-based arguments. They're all based on how can we optimize the terrain. But of course, it is true that infections can also lower health, lower quality of life, and lead to premature death. So let's talk about it. There's two different types of infection. There's acute and chronic. Acute infections are really, in the realm of a medical professional. It's one of the things that they actually do well in many cases, I would say. If I have an acute infection, I will go and see a doctor. So when I love does, then I will encourage them to do it. So I'm not really going to address that. That's their expertise. But let's talk about chronic infections for a second, because when it comes to, as we said, in terms of living longer, most people these days don't actually die of acute infections. It does happen. In our top 10 list, we saw acute respiratory infections was, what was it, number 9 on the list there?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where it was, but yeah, it was definitely up there.
Yeah, I can see. But number 9, so, it was less than 10%. So the vast majority of diseases these days are chronic diseases. So that, the most common being chronic metabolic, which is something we've really talked about. But I believe that chronic infections are more important than probably the average person in the alternative health world looks at. And even probably more important than most people in the mainstream medicine are aware of. And so chronic infections tend to and can only exist in areas that are technically outside of the body. So what does that mean? So the skin is the barrier of the body that delineates what is inside and outside, right? But what about in your mouth? Is that inside or outside of the body? The inside of your mouth. Correct. Because even though when you've got your mouth closed, it seems inside, there's still the layer of skin delineating it, right? Well, not only is that true for your mouth, it's actually true for your whole digestive tract. Your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, the whole digestive tract is all, from your immune system's point of view, technically outside the body. The sinuses and the nostrils are outside the body. The ear canal, up to a certain point, is outside the body. The skin, obviously, is outside the body. The vagina is outside the body. And the urethra, up until a certain point, somewhere along the way when it reaches the bladder, is considered to be technically outside the body. Well, all these areas that I've just said are where people get chronic infections. People get colds, they get sinusitis, they get sinus infections, they get ear infections, they get gum infections, mouth infections, tooth infections, and they get digestive infections. They get H. pylori in the stomach, and they get, all kinds of digestive infections in the small and large intestine, and they get, skin infections like fungal being the most common. Fungal infection in the vagina as well. Bacterial infection tends to happen in the urinary tract. So different areas that I just mentioned outside, that are technically outside the body, tend to have different stuff. So respiratory tends to be more viral, and digestive tends to be more, bacterial, especially, and also fungal. But whatever, there are these areas that have chronic infections. When these chronic infections are not dealt with, and the thing is, it's possible for chronic infections not to be dealt with. That's the crucial thing. Once an infection is actually inside the body, inside. Oh, and lungs. I didn't say lungs, sorry. But the lungs are technically outside the body as well. Once these infectious agents are inside the body, from an immune system point of view, they either are dealt with fairly quickly, or they're an actual emergency, a medical emergency, a go to hospital level of emergency, or at least see a doctor level emergency, and if not dealt with, a go to hospital level emergency. But you can have a chronic infection in all these areas that are technically outside the body for decades, and it can never become an emergency. You can have a chronic sinus infection, chronic UTIs, chronic skin infection, toenail infection, I guess it's part of the skin, but chronic digestive, SIBO, and large intestine bacterial overgrowth, chronic H. pylori, although that can lead to stomach ulcers. Most people with H. pylori never get a stomach ulcer. So and of course, the most common chronic infection of all, which some people estimate, over 95% of people have, chronic gum infection, right? What happens when you have a chronic infection to your quality of life, your health, and also your longevity? Well, it's not good. So first of all, when you have a chronic infection, your immune system starts to become dysregulated. Remember we said earlier that you're more likely to die these days of your immune system killing you than the actual infectious agent killing you. Well, one of the things that leads to that immune system being that way is that it's chronically overstimulated by having an infection there that is not resolved. So that's one of them. And remember, in the past, it would have either killed you or your body would have resolved it. But now, because of antibiotics and antivirals to some degree, and antifungals and the rest of it, you can keep knocking it back, not resolving it, but then also not having it kill you. And so you're in this position where you have chronic infections going on and on and on and on. As I said, sometimes for decades. All these infectious agents, especially the ones that are technically not inside your body, but you'd think are, like the ones in your digestive tract, or the ones in your lungs, or the ones in your sinuses, are all creating toxins all the time. And so especially the ones in your digestive tract, every time you feed them, they then release a bunch of toxins, and your digestive tract is designed to absorb stuff. So it's going to absorb a bunch of those toxins. Even more if you have, what they call leaky gut, or what's more probably called increased intestinal permeability. But even without that, and even infections in your lungs, even though your lungs are designed to absorb oxygen, obviously, well, they'll absorb some stuff. Famously, if you have a fungal infection or like a mold inside your lungs, the mold can't get through your lungs into your bloodstream, but the toxins that the mold creates, the mycotoxins, can go through your lungs into your bloodstream. So, and then, bacteria in your mouth, obviously things going to be absorbed through the mouth itself, sublingually, and then you can swallow those toxins and absorb them through your digestive tract. So that's the problem with chronic infections. There's more than those, but those are the top two problems. The chronic overstimulation and dysregulation of your immune system, and the chronic constant assault of extra toxicity can really take its toll and lead to premature aging. And some people who we've mentioned before on this podcast, even in the alternative world, like Hulda Clark and Ray Peat, believed that these were actually the biggest factors in causing disease and premature aging.
Because of the taxing on the immune system? Is that why they thought that it was
both.
The biggest? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Peat, he was more focused on endotoxin. So he was more focused on the toxic element. And I think Hulda Clark was more focused on, that first part. Yeah, the impact on the immune system. Remember, again, if we look at our most common causes of death, they pretty much all have a inflammatory component to it. And the two biggest buzzwords I see talked about in the kind of mainstream health world are metabolic and inflammatory as like root causes of all diseases. And I feel like neither of them were understood. So I'm so sick of people talking about metabolism without talking about thyroid. But, we talked about that before, including this episode. But I'm also so sick of people talking about inflammation without talking about the immune system. Like, inflammation doesn't exist without the immune system. Inflammation can only be a dysregulation of the immune system. So what's causing that dysregulation of the immune system? Well, if you look at Pasteur's definition of what the immune system is, it's an army that fights off invaders. If you look at the Béchamp perspective on what the immune system is, it's a cleanup crew, right? So that gives us some clues. Let's say they're both right, as you said, Chrissy. So then the problem is too many invaders not dealt with, that's the chronic infections, and too many toxins not dealt with or building up to an excessive amount, which is the other perspective. And I'd say they're both relevant. So rather than think, inflammation is not like a turmeric deficiency. Inflammation is an immune system dysregulation, which is fundamentally down to sometimes it's acute infections, but much more likely to be chronic infections and toxic excesses. And the two go together because chronic infections create toxins, as we talked about.
Okay. So let me ask you this, and maybe this might be for another time. So if it is, then we'll carry on. What about something like things like arthritis and things like that are causing the pain? I mean, that's usually related to inflammation, but that's inside the body.
Yeah, so rheumatoid arthritis is classified as an autoimmune disease, I'm pretty sure. It's not classified as something infectious, I'm certain of that. So the idea is, that's okay. Let's talk a little bit more about autoimmunity. So I'm not a super expert on this. The immune system is extremely complex, but here's my understanding of it. So the immune system is constantly regulating between what is and is not self. That's its crucial job. Inside the body, right? We've really defined that. But inside, so in your mouth, in your digestive tract, there could be a load of not self stuff, right? There should be in your lungs, right? There's supposed to be air in your lungs. There's supposed to be food in your digestive tract. All of that's not self. All of that's okay. But once it crosses that barrier and goes into the body, it needs to be identified as self. This is why with food, it's so important that it's broken down enough, that it's broken down into individual amino acids, individual glucose molecules, individual lipids. Because if the pieces of food that go into the that get absorbed into the bloodstream are too big, if they're still proteins, if they're still too large a piece of fat as well, your body can go, oh, that's not self, and it starts attacking it. So the immune system attack maybe is more of the army metaphor, but it either attacks or attempts to clean up, let's just say, anything that it defines as not self. And how does it know if it's self or not self, right? It's not through some magic. It's something that was, I think, discovered relatively recently, like within the last 10, 15 years. And and it's something, I think they call it TLR. And my understanding is it's something like a barcode. Like every cell has this kind of barcode on it that identifies what it is. And so the body goes around scanning everything. Sorry, the immune system goes around scanning everything, like at the supermarket, deep, with a little barcode reader thing. Deep, are you? And then it's like, oh, yep, you're supposed to be there. That's fine. Oh, you're supposed to be there. That's fine. And then it finds some things that aren't. Now, where it gets complicated is that everything in nature is kind of at war with everything else, and so, for instance, plants don't want to be eaten. Plants especially don't want their seeds to be eaten. So animals also don't want to be eaten, but animals have the defense mechanism of fighting back or hiding or running away. Plants can't fight back, hide, or run away, or they kind of can, but the way that they do it is they can fight back, but they do it chemically. So they produce chemicals. And so it seems that plants have evolved this capacity to create on on themselves in general and on their seeds specifically, the capacity to look very, very similar to the cells that should exist within the human body. The other thing that's managed this, not just plants, is all those organisms we just talked about. Bacteria, fungus, molds, yeasts. I'm not sure about viruses, parasites, so most of them at least, if not all of them. And so because they are attempting to get in there and not be, taken down, taken out. And so they try and camouflage themselves as if they're the body's own cells, right? So everything's trying to camouflage itself. And so when the kind of barcode of an infectious agent, or in fact even a food component, gets into the bloodstream and starts creating problems, the body will tag it as this is, and what about if it's something new? Sorry, that's the other part of it. What about if it's something new? Then the body will identify it and look at what's going on with it and how it behaves. And if it identifies it as a threat, it will then tag it. And it'll go, this barcode, it'll send a message throughout all its colleagues, this is a threat. You find this, deal with it, fight it, kill it, get rid of it. Now, the problem is when that immune system is not working perfectly, it can, first of all, it can misidentify. And second of all, it can misidentify the thing in the first place. But second of all, it can confuse and again, this is not purely down to the immune system getting it wrong, but the other things are trying to create that confusion, like different organisms, so that basically...
It's kind of like PSYOPs.
Yeah, exactly. So that basically you will start to... So then the immune system will tag it, that's a threat, and then it will start attacking its own cells. That's the danger of it. And so... I got this partly from Dr. Gundry's book, because he was a heart surgeon. He talked about that. He's very famous these days. I think most people have heard of him. And he talks about lectins, how seeds do this specifically. And but he talked about how everyone who had a certain type of infection, I think it was Staphylococcus, he always found this massive build of calcification in their heart. And he said that when he looked into it, the heart tissue had almost exactly the same barcode as this particular infection that they had. So basically the person has the infection like 30 years ago, the immune system tags it, as this is a threat, and then it's, for the next 20, 30 years, it's attacking this heart valve because it has pretty much the same barcode.
Yeah. Oh, God, that makes so much sense. Okay.
So to go back to your original question, the rheumatoid arthritis, my understanding is that's the same thing. At some point, the immune system has tagged that tissue, in the case of arthritis, that's going to be the connective tissue, or even the bone, but I think it's more the connective tissue, it's tagged something similar enough as a threat, either because of some plant defense chemical or because of some kind of pathogenic organism or even maybe neutral organism defense chemical. And then it started to attack the body's own tissues as a result.
Right. So then, well, my next question, which I don't know if we're going to answer it today, is then how do we rewrite that? How do we get that scanner back to what do you call it? Reset.
Well, there's, and I know the reason you got more questions about this than most of these characters because we haven't done an episode of this yet, Chrissy, so we might have to kind of do
I
a
think
whole
so.
episode of
Yeah,
this.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack here in this one, and I know we do need to move on because of our time, and we've got one step left. So, if there was anything that you wanted to finish on.
Well, let me ask that question.
Okay.
Ask me again, but what was it?
So essentially, it's like, how do we then reset that scanner so that it's not, attacking something that was similar as it was previously? How do we wipe the slate clean?
So I'm going to give you two answers to that. The kind of more well-known one and then also the more fringe one, which I think has a lot of validity. So the more well-known answer to that is basically, although the immune system is incredibly complex, it has kind of two categories of a lot of these interleukins and cytokines and all the rest of it. You have the pro-inflammatory ones, which are more the attacking ones, and then you have the regulatory ones. And so when there is that tendency to be over-enthusiastic in attacking, which could be over-enthusiastically attacking a genuine pathogen, and where the immune system causes more damage than the infection itself, we talked about that earlier, or it could be the over-enthusiasm in attacking something and not realizing that the barcode is slightly different, right? That is put down to too much of the attacking immune system constituents and not enough of the regulatory immune system constituents. And so the mainstream answer to that question that you just gave is to increase the ratio of regulatory immune system components to attacking ones. And so a lot of the things that are considered anti-inflammatory, that's actually the mechanism whereby they work. Whether it's thymosin beta-4 and thymosin alpha-1 that we've talked about, or whether it's, curcumin, or whether it's, any of omega-3, any of these kind of nutritional anti-inflammatory compounds. Generally, the mechanism by which they seem to work is increasing the regulatory ones and reducing the offensive constituents of the immune system. Now, the other answer that I think is relevant, that I don't see talked about anywhere near as much, is that the other problem, and we have talked about this before, but it's quite a few episodes ago, is it's not just adjusting the ratios, it's also that those immune system antibodies are not working correctly because they've been damaged. And what have they been damaged by? They've been damaged by toxicity. So remember, cells are constantly replicating, skin cells, liver cells, whatever, but immune system cells, white blood cells, are also constantly replicating. And remember, every time it replicates, if a fault has been added in, it's like a photocopy or Chinese whispers, we talked about that in the last episode, then that, or the game of telephone, then that copy from then on is slightly suboptimal, not working as well as it should be. And so what is it that causes that cellular damage? That's toxicity or nutritional deficiency. Always goes back to those things. It's a deficiency or an excess. But in this day and age, maybe 500 years ago, deficiencies were more the problem. Excesses were not such a big deal. In this day and age, excesses are the problem. Deficiencies are not such a big deal. And so it's really those excesses, it's those toxins that cause so much of the immune system not to work properly. If you just reduce the toxicity, make sure there's enough of the building blocks, then the original DNA template programming should be able to take over and get those immune system components working better again. Because it's not truly like a photocopy where the only copy it's got is the last one. There is actually a blueprint contained in the DNA. It's just been corrupted. by the exposure to toxicity and the lack of building blocks. But if you manage to reduce that toxicity, everything can start working better. And I think, again, that's not the mainstream understanding, but I believe that's very valid as well.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, those are the two options, two ways. Thank you for answering that.
And you want to do both.
Yeah.
You want to do both. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. We're going to take a quick break to share with you one of our amazing sponsors, Genetic Insights. What makes Genetic Insights uniquely valuable is that they test over 83 million different variants, which guarantees a 99.7% accuracy on all of their DNA reports. With over 100 reports available, you get comprehensive insights into what your DNA is telling you about how to optimize your health today and in the future. I've found reviewing my results to be incredibly accurate and applying some of the recommendations, which are personalized to your individual DNA, to be extremely helpful for me and my family. I also loved how easy it was to upload my raw DNA data that I already had from previously using Ancestry.com, because Genetic Insights supports uploading raw data from all major platforms. To get your health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and get 20% off today by using coupon code Rejuvenate. Remember that supporting our sponsors supports our podcast, which allows us to keep sharing this important information with you free of cost. So, go get your Genetic Insights health reports by going to geneticinsights.co and use coupon code Rejuvenate for 20% off today. All right, Elwin, I know we're coming down to it, so thank you so much. This has been really great. I know we have one more step left to go, so can you please introduce step 7 of the Rejuvenation Blueprint?
So the last one is definitely the most controversial in some ways when you first introduce it to people, but when they really understand it, I think it's kind of obvious and everyone agrees with it. So let me make sure I explain this correctly. Number 7, I put down to emotions and mindset. Now, depending on how you look at it, you can actually say this is like the most deep, even deeper than genetics, or you could say it's the most outside, or it's kind of non-local. I would say that's more the truth of it. So steps 1 to 6 really don't require any understanding of anything other than the material universe, right? Everything that we've covered so far is perfectly, even if it's not always agreed with by the mainstream, it's perfectly understandable from a purely materialistic point of view. Once I start to invite emotions and mindset, the pure materialist within us immediately is like, oh God, this is woo-woo, this is nonsense. He already mentioned chakras earlier, now I know he's off the deep end, But bear with me, because actually not only is there decent scientific underpinnings for this, but actually the whole scientific medical profession is the foundation of it is what I'm about to say. Like, it literally wouldn't exist without it. And I'm going to try and explain this one quickly, because we recorded a full audio-only episode in this at one point, Chrissy, which we may release, and we may redo it as a video one. But I don't want to go through it in too much detail, but this is super, super important. I'll try and do it as concisely as I can.
I was going to say, this step deserves a whole episode on its own. It really does. It really does.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'll do my best to do it justice while being concise. And I won't focus on every element of it for that reason, just like I haven't really with any of them. I'll just focus on what I believe to be the most important aspect of it. So let's actually talk about the scientific method for a second. If I recommend things like, we talked about earlier, let's say you have stress and I say, I think you should have some B vitamins and you should have some magnesium and you should have some ashwagandha and you should have some lithium and you should have some whatever, right? Any skeptical mainstream medical scientific person would go, that's nonsense. There's not enough scientific evidence for that. And I'd say, well, what do you mean? There's plenty of studies. And they'll be like, well, but there's not enough proper studies. Oh, how do you define a proper study? Well, you don't know that? Okay, let me tell you. It's a double-blind, there's not enough double-blind, placebo-controlled trials to prove these assertions you're making, Elwin. Oh, okay. Why does it matter that they're double-blind, placebo-controlled trials? Well, there's this thing called the placebo effect. And what the placebo effect is that if you take something and you believe that it's going to help you, then often it can help you, even though there's nothing innately about it that will help you. And so, there are obviously the start of this was they used to give people sugar pills and tell them it's a miracle cure. And even when they had very serious life-threatening diseases, they would sometimes, much more often than statistically you would think, get better. And so because of that tendency, because of the tendency, if an authority tells you this is going to cure you and give it to you, you get cured. They said that, just the fact that we're giving you this pill and it's making you better doesn't prove that the pill works. We have to, and so what we'll do is we'll take a bunch of people and we'll give half of them the real thing and we'll give half of them like nothing, like an empty pill, a sugar pill, whatever. And not only does the pill have to make the person better, the pill with the stuff, the real stuff, has to work significantly statistically better than just the sugar pill. Okay? But that's not enough, because apparently then the people administering the pills, when they knew which ones were real and which were not, it would still affect the outcome, because
they knew.
The confidence of the doctor or the physician giving the medication would be on some level perceivable by the person receiving the medication. And they would, subconscious cues and stuff. You don't have to believe in anything woo-woo just to believe in that. And so that would still confound the studies. That still made it unreliable. So what did they have to do? So then they had to do double blind. That's what double blind means. So it means that you, the person receiving the medicine, don't know if you're getting the real thing or not. And the person giving it to you doesn't know if it's the real thing or not. So that is the gold standard of telling if a medication, a drug, a herb, a supplement, a nutrient, or anything else, but really, a consumable, because if it's something like meditation or exercise, you can't really trick people into whether they're receiving it or not. So it's really, it's a pill, basically, or a powder, something like that. That is the gold standard for testing if they work or not. And as I said, whenever I recommend alternative stuff, the critics, the cynics will say, that's nonsense because it hasn't been proven with a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Okay, then. Now, I see a new level of insanity where I see certain medical people saying that the placebo effect is not a real thing. I'm like, how is that possible? How can you say that in one breath and yet in the other breath say that all these herbs and traditional remedies and all the rest of it are not valid because they haven't been proven in placebo-controlled double-blind trials? No, it's nonsense. It's a logical inconsistency. Now, the placebo-controlled double-blind trials absolutely are a good thing to do because the placebo effect is real. Spoiler alert. There is a huge amount of evidence for this. I'm not going to list a bunch of anecdotes because I haven't memorized them, but it's something you can look into, and I'll give a recommendation for a second of what I think is a really good resource to look into them a lot. But this is something that has really been known throughout history. So, a couple of hundred years ago, there was like faith healing, Christian Science, all the rest of it, basically praying in order to heal people. But this has actually been the case throughout the ages. As I said, it's only about 150 years ago that we decided that bacteria and infectious agents were the root cause of disease. Throughout the vast majority of history, the vast majority of the time, disease has actually been put down to one of two different things. It's either been put down to an imbalance of the humors. So in the Western world, we had sanguine, phlegmatic, choleric, I can't remember the fourth one. And then, in Ayurveda, they had the doshas, and in Chinese medicine, you have like the 5 elements. But some kind of imbalance is one way that one thing that would be seen as the root cause of disease. The other thing that would be seen as the root cause of disease was some kind of deficiency or excess, same thing that I've just been talking about, of a natural substance. And then, surprisingly commonly, probably more common than deficiency or an excess, was the effect of evil spirits, especially with any kind of mental health issues, but really very commonly with physical health issues as well. And so, because that was the belief, but if you believe that some kind of evil influence is the cause, then the cure is going to be what? It's going to be prayer, maybe exorcism, maybe, calling forth spirits to heal the person, calling forth gods to heal the person. It's really interesting looking at the medicine of ancient Egypt, which in some ways was a culture more advanced than ours. There are, certainly archaeologically, there are some proofs of that. And so interestingly, they had herbal medicine, they had nutritional medicine, they had surgery, they had all kinds of stuff that we had these days. But what they also had, which we're profoundly lacking in our current medicine, was the doctor or physician itself would, as well as doing all that very practical stuff, would also call into themselves, like they would make themselves like the god of medicine or something, Thoth or I can't remember the others, Khonsu, these kind of healing gods, and Isis goddesses and stuff like that. And anyway, the belief of the patient that the person administering the herb or even the surgery or whatever was an embodiment of a divine healing force, I can imagine would have been very, very effective because of this placebo effect, right? Especially if you believe that the cause of the illness was an evil spirit being cast away by the god, rather than believing it was a bacteria, or believing it was a toxin or whatever may actually be more likely to be the case. So now all of what I just said is absolute nonsense from any materialistic point of view, right? And all the people pushing it are charlatans and hucksters and all the rest of it. So there's one person who I've recommended before who took a very, very clever approach to this, and that is Joe Dispenza. And so I don't know if it was his first book, but I think it was at least his first or second book, and it's called You Are the Placebo. And the thing that he did with this, I think, is brilliant. Rather than arguing with the medical and scientific profession that his methods of meditation and visualization and stuff like that, whether or not they were the placebo effect, he said, no, this absolutely is the placebo effect that's healing people. And he's got a lot of, these days, scientific people who have studied. I was part of even one of his research groups where they were doing healings on people using the power of, visualization and all this stuff that I'm going to describe better in a second. And there's been, he's accrued a lot of evidence that it really works. But anyway, the genius of what he did to me was to not argue with people whether it's the placebo effect. No, he said it is the placebo effect. But he said, what is the placebo effect? The placebo effect, what is it about a doctor coming to you and saying, with full confidence saying, here's a pill, this will cure you, and you taking that pill and getting better, even though there's nothing in the pill? How does that work? By what mechanism does that work? Which is a very interesting question, right? Now, obviously, the answer to that, the kind of mainstream answer is, well, it's because you believe it's going to work. That's what the placebo effect is. You believe it's going to work, so it works. But then what is belief, right? Because let's say, if I've got a headache, if I say to myself, I don't have a headache, I don't have a headache, I don't have a headache, it doesn't work usually, right? So belief isn't just telling yourself something. That's the important distinction. So what is it then? And so what he narrowed it down to is belief is the combination of a feeling and an image. So if that doctor comes to you and says, good news, Mrs. Smith, you've qualified for this breakthrough new medicine. It's incredibly effective. Just take this and your pain, your disease, whatever will go away. Why does that work, even when there's nothing in there? It works because, first of all, you visualize, you see, this is going to work. And then second of all, and I'd say more importantly, you feel like it's going to work. You go from anxiety and fear and trepidation and worry and doubt and uncertainty to, oh, I feel confident, right? I feel relief. I feel grateful. I feel all the feelings I would feel if I'd just been handed something that heals me. And therefore, I'm healed very often. Often enough that it's crucial to do double-blind, placebo-controlled trials to prove a drug works, to go back to that, just to hammer that point home again. It's very, very reliable about how much it works. It actually works often more and better than most drugs. That's how powerful the placebo effect is. So, anyway, back to Joe Dispenza. That's what he identified it as. And he said, okay, so if someone else can trick you into believing that this thing is going to heal you, why can't you trick yourself into believing that you're going to get healed, right? And so he has a whole method for that, and he has like guided visualizations and all the rest of it. And especially if you've tried a lot of other stuff and it hasn't worked, there's a reason this is step 7 and not step 1. It may actually be the most effective of all the steps, but I would also say it's the most difficult to do to yourself. So that's why it's step 7, not step 1. It's not easy. And even people who follow these systems, he's had great results, but usually it's like weeks, months, even sometimes over a year of disciplined practice. Most people, you have to be very highly motivated to, be that disciplined and that focused. Because it's not easy to basically rewire your brain, to rewire how you feel in most cases. If you have a disease you've had for a long time, or if you have a disease that's life-threatening or whatever, it's not easy to convince yourself that you don't, basically. But it's possible. And so when I talk about emotions and mindset, yes, I'm talking about the fact that you actually probably can heal yourself of almost anything, it seems, if you have enough motivation, enough discipline, and enough commitment to placeboing yourself. But there's also something else called the nocebo effect. Have you heard of that, Chrissy?
I have, and guess what? From you.
Okay. So
but prior to that, no, I hadn't. So no, yeah, please, if you wouldn't mind sharing again.
So I'll go back to antiquity for a second. So just as there were priests and witch doctors and shamans and healers and all the rest throughout history who would purportedly heal people with the power of their mind, maybe with the power of, they believed it was God, spirits, whatever. There are also people who cursed people to disease, death, misfortune, or whatever, through the power of their mind, through the power of, whatever disease they believed it was gods or demons or whatever that was helping them do it. But the bottom line is, you can heal someone by telling them, I'm giving you a healing thing, but you can also make someone sick by telling them, I'm making you sick. Your voodoo doll, your charm, your amulet, your whatever, right? Whatever they used to do. Your curse, I guess cursing would be, And so that's been true throughout human history, and it's still true today.
And that also goes for a doctor saying, no, actually, that's not going to work.
Yeah, well, that's the example I was about to give. Yeah, so I don't remember many of these anecdotes off the top of my head, but one I do remember is, the story of a guy with terminal cancer who had a doctor who gave him a drug that he told him would cure him. The guy started to get better, was in remission. Then the doctor came along and said, actually, bad news, we got study results back. The drug doesn't work. And then the guy got worse and died. And then it turned out that was a mistake, that those study results were early, there'd been some mistake about it, and the drug actually did work. So as much as it's true that a doctor telling you this will work can heal you, even if it's nothing, it's actually the other way around as well. Not only can placebo and nocebo turn a nothing into a heal or a curse, but the crazy thing is they can actually turn one thing into the opposite. So a doctor or an authority figure, in the past, maybe there was a priest, a medicine woman, whatever, shaman, not only can they give you nothing and tell you it's going to heal you or that it's going to make you sick, they can actually give you a amphetamine and tell you it is a Xanax and you will feel sedated. Or they can give you a Xanax and tell you it's an amphetamine and you can feel stimulated. So not only can they turn nothing into something, they can even turn something very strongly one way into the opposite. There are studies showing that as well. Yeah. So the power of belief is extremely important. Now, why do I say all this? First of all, because if you are suffering with something and nothing else has worked, and you feel desperate enough, you may well have the discipline and willpower enough to commit to some kind of placeboing yourself practice, like Joe Dispenza recommends. But also for you to understand that the thing stopping you getting better may actually be your mind, not a lack of any of the other things that we've talked about. I see there was a good, what was her name? I'll try and remember. If I can't, then we'll put it in the notes afterwards. But there's a great author who talks about this, who kind of, I think, started off teaching like people how to heal themselves, kind of faith healing kind of stuff, but then started to look at why it didn't work. Dorian something. Anyway, she noticed that the people who just didn't get better, not only did they not get better through faith healing stuff, they didn't get better through mainstream medicine, they didn't get better through nutritional medicine, they didn't get better through cleanse, they didn't get better through anything. And what she noticed, they had something in common, which is this particular attitude, this kind of attitude of victimhood, this attitude of hopelessness, this attitude, nothing is going to work, nothing's going to make me feel better. So that's kind of, how to address disease, but we're meant to be talking about anti-aging here. So it's the same thing. If you believe by the time I'm 40, I'm already going to be, unhealthy like my parents were, and by the time I'm 60, I'm already going to be, like infirm like my grandparents were and all the rest of it, that strong belief will actually override and can override anything that you're doing. And conversely, if maybe you had different role models, different imprint, and maybe you had a grandfather or grandmother who smoked, drank alcohol, ate unhealthily, and was still happy and active at 100, you may believe that you can get away with murder and feel great. And in both cases, you may be right. That's the crazy thing. So this is extremely important. As I said, the only reason it isn't I think with Dr. Dispenza, for instance, it's the only step in his system. The reason it's not the only step in my system is because it takes a long time, usually, for this practice to have an impact from what I've observed, talking to a lot of people who've done it. And second of all, basically, it kind of often involves really overcoming a lifetime worth of programming inside you, which is maybe the most worthwhile thing you can ever do in terms of, both the impact on you, but maybe also the inspiration it has on everyone around you. But on the other hand, is also can be very difficult, depending on, like, if you have a strong victim mindset, everyone else around you has had a very strong victim mindset, everyone else around you has been very genuinely unhealthy, very genuinely unhappy, etc., etc., etc. And that's the imprint that you have. Overcoming that is not easy. And so if you can resolve whatever issues you have by more practical stuff, then that may well be a better starting point. And remember, there's a connection between all this and all the other steps and how you feel, right? So if you're in a victim mindset, I'm not making fun of that, because that may well be because you got lack of B vitamins, because you got a lack of B1, because you got too much mercury, because you got too much glyphosate, because you don't have enough progesterone, you don't have enough testosterone, you have too much cortisol, you have chronic infection even, you don't have enough sunlight, you don't have enough red light, you're not moving enough, like everything that we just talked about, you don't have enough sleep. Everything that we just talked about can put you into a mindset where you start to feel like nothing's possible, nothing's ever going to get better for me, everything's pointless, all of that kind of stuff. And so to give you the greatest chance of success, I do recommend you do all the practical stuff as well, so that it's the easiest possible to take on an empowered mindset and believe that, yes, it is possible for me to heal myself. yes, it is possible for me to not just be okay, but actually maybe feel better than I ever have in my life. But that can be a really tricky thing for a lot of people. Ironically, actually, I think if you have a life-threatening thing, that can give you the jolt that gives you the motivation to really commit to one of these kind of practices despite all of that stuff. But if you're more in the same boat that most of us are in, of just chronic issues but that are not immediately life-threatening, then it can be very difficult to kind of snap out of the, oh God, nothing's going to work. I'm unlucky. I'm just born this way. There's nothing I can do about it. All of that kind of mental programming, which, a lot of us, unfortunately, not only are we stuck with from early conditioning, which I mentioned, which is probably the most important factor, but actually we're receiving it, throughout the world around us these days. It's in the media, it's in the culture, it's coming from everywhere. The message of empowerment and personal responsibility is being more and more drowned out by the message of victimhood and futility in this day and age. So we really need every tool in our arsenal we can to overcome that these days, I feel.
This is a very, very, very important step. I totally understand why it's the seventh one, because as you said, this isn't an easy step, even though, some people are like, oh yeah, sure, that's easy. It's like, I don't know if that's, as you said, some people dedicate the whole of their life and to this. And it may not even, it's not an easy process sometimes,
It depends totally on, probably the first 5 years in your life. I mean, that's really it from a psychology point of view. If you had significant neglect and trauma and abuse and any of that kind of stuff, it's not an excuse to be whatever, but it's just reality. It makes it harder, in the same way that your genetics can make dealing with certain things harder. That early life imprint can make certain things a lot harder for someone else. If you are listening to this and go, it's no big deal, Elwin, I can just change my mindset. I can just, easily and fully visualize myself 24 hours a day being healthy and happy and full of vitality, then excellent. It probably won't take that long for you. But for most of us, when we actually try it, we get a lot of backlash, a lot of resistance come up, which is the old programming, which Joe Dispenza also talks about and does a very good job explaining. And he's certainly not the only one who does this. What I like about him, there's loads, as I said, and there have been loads throughout history, up to the most ancient civilizations out there. Everyone has been doing this. But what I like about it is he has very scientific explanations for things, and he's been involved in a lot of scientific research to prove this stuff. So I like that.
Elwin, thank you for these 7 steps. I mean, I remember when you first explained them to me, it was like, oh, this is a space for me to really look at things for myself, because as you've just explained in step 7, the power of the person that is, your doctor or anybody like that, the power that they potentially do have over you or to influence the direction of where your health is going is quite significant. And what I like about the 7 steps of the Rejuvenation Blueprint is actually that puts the power back into my hands, which is what I really love. So what I do want to ask, how does somebody now really apply this?
Well, it depends on the circumstance, right? But I'll give a few general tendencies that I have, and then you can ask, more clarifying and specific ones if you want. So I would say if a person has the luxury of money but they want to, but not really time and effort. So generally people who are, employed, who are earning good money, but do not have a lot of time and mental energy, I would suggest starting pretty much in the order I gave. So first of all, I would, look at the genetic stuff, and then I would look at building blocks. I would test for everything, and then start taking in those building blocks, and then go from there, because that may well make a significant difference. I would also then I would test for the most common toxic issues as well, right? The most common toxicities. Look for, there's tests you can do to see if your body is generally suffering with an excess of toxicity. So I'd go in that angle, go from that angle. If a person is not feeling good, depressed, tired, whatever it might be, and they just want a quick fix, I would start with number 4. I would look at the hormones. How's thyroid doing? How's the adrenal hormones doing? How's the sex hormones doing? How's insulin doing at minimum? And then look at what can we do to, adjust those. Go and see some hormonal doctor who's able to prescribe stuff for you, who understands all the stuff that we teach in this channel at least, and can give you something that will make you feel better straight away, not in a band-aid way. I mean, I kind of call it a band-aid because I guess the ultimate thing is to deal with the deficiencies and excesses and maybe also environmental and pathogen and emotional issues. But it's just so much easier to do all that stuff if you're not feeling exhausted, suicide, like all of that kind of stuff. Like if you're not feeling like life isn't worth living, if you're not feeling like you can barely cope, if you're not feeling overwhelmed, all that stuff. So it could just, optimizing hormones can just give you energy, can give you confidence, can give you focus, the things that you really need, happiness even, the things that you really need to be able to do the other stuff. So that's in that case. If a person is short of money, but they have time, then I would recommend starting with step 5. Which is the lifestyle factors, right? You don't need any money at all to try and sleep better. I know it's not always easy, but for most people, they are sabotaging their sleep. For a small amount of people, there's something really stopping them that they have to address. But for most people, they could exercise more, even if maybe there's something stopping them exercising beyond a certain level. For most people, they could do better with circadian rhythms, getting more light by actually going outside when they first wake up, by turning off the blue light sources once it gets dark outside, all of that kind of stuff. That doesn't cost any money, right? They could reduce their voluntary stressors, they can be careful to avoid damage. And, they can do meditation every day. They can do positive visualization. They can focus on what they're grateful for. All of that good stuff doesn't cost any money. Neither does anything in step 7, by the way. You can go onto YouTube or any of these free things and listen to guided meditations on self-healing, on, making the placebo effect work for you. So step 5 and step 7, probably in that order, because again, trying to meditate and stuff, if you're like barely moving and not sleeping enough, and I would start with the basics first, but then I would get into meditation. So that's more what I would do if you're in a place of I have no money, but I have a bit of time and a bit of willpower and discipline. You notice none of what I've said actually says starting with step 6, which is actually the first step in both the mainstream medical profession, in not all cases, depending on what you've got, but it's, as I said, it's kind of based on getting rid of pathogens, the whole mainstream medical system. But the mainstream medical system is more based on dealing with acute infections. The functional medicine system is more based on dealing with chronic infections as their first step. The reason why I don't believe that's a good first step in most cases is because of the terrain stuff that we talked about earlier. I believe, and it has also been our experience, that, for instance, if someone's metabolism is quite low because of lack of thyroid, or maybe because of lack of building blocks, excess toxicity, whatever, like taking, usually they recommend oregano oil and garlic and, all these kind of natural antimicrobials, antifungals, whatever. That's like, why not strengthen the body and see if it can deal with itself first, and then do that kind of stuff? And because I have seen that, and I've experienced it for myself, that when you don't do that, none of that stuff works. And unfortunately, that's often the case. Ditto with detoxing, by the way. All the people who do cleanses and take various different things to encourage detox or support detox. I mean, taking binders is probably a safe thing to do in most cases, without having kind of, done other stuff, doing other stuff for the direct terrain. But generally, detoxing wouldn't be my starting point either. So I guess, 3 and 6 would be my least favorite starting points. because toxicity often throws up a lot of, unfortunately, we don't have like a Star Trek type thing where we can just like hone in on the toxins in you and then like teleport them out of you. Like the process of getting them out is quite a strain on the whole body, can often make you feel worse before it makes you feel better. And so to not have dialed anything else in first, to not have improved your hormones so that you feel better, to not have improved your building blocks so that your cells, have the best chance possible of working better before you deal with toxins, to not have shifted your mindset and your lifestyle, it's not the best idea to me. And exactly the same for pathogens. So yeah, often dealing with chronic infections and dealing with toxins are actually the most important thing you can do. They're the things holding you back the most, especially toxins, because we said we're kind of flooded with them these days. But starting there is generally a bad idea, I think. So that's the very general advice. Do you want anything more specific than that?
No, I guess. Well, no, not more specific. I think how you've laid it out, it would be like, okay, as we were talking about it and discussing it, start with step one. But as you've given those certain instances, then there's some other ways to look at it instead of just going in numerical order. Let me ask you this, and I know we have done our an episode on tests, our best test episode. But what would you recommend for somebody when you say testing? What specific tests would you recommend for them to begin as they start on this journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me just go back and give one more answer to the previous question. It also obviously depends on what you're struggling with. So, for instance, if the person's main issue is, I don't know, sinus issues, probably building blocks wouldn't be my starting point because that's not usually the problem. If someone has sinus issues, it's usually going to be obviously a pathogen is one potential thing, a toxin is another potential thing, and then it could be lack of sleep, lifestyle factor, stress, which is imbalancing the immune system to cause excess histamine, for instance, that can create it, cause digestive issues that can create it. So that's just one example of like breaking my own rules. If a person has a specific issue that obviously is 3 or 6, then maybe I would start with 3 or 6. So I would take it on a case-by-case basis, but I guess the rules I gave are like general rules, that if there is say digestion, which is such a broad one, or cardiovascular health, which is such a broad one, because it really could be any of those things: cardiovascular health, digestive health, lack of energy, depression, any of those things really could be any of the 7 things. And so when it's something that could be any of the 7 things, then I would base it based on the kind of criteria that I gave before. But if it's something a bit more niche and specific, like joint, I got a pain in my knee, I've got this, I got that, then I would say, okay, well, out of this 7, what's the most likely culprit, and kind of hone in on that.
Right. Well, okay. I mean, you bring a really great point. Like, let's say somebody suffered with migraines forever and they're on some pharmaceuticals, but they just don't know what's causing it. Like, what would you recommend for them to, when they see these 7 steps, what would you think that would, their beginning point would be?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at genetics for that. We do have a report on that, so we can see if that is a tendency, and if so, there would be specific recommendations based on the person's genetics. I think migraines are quite a systemic issue, so I probably actually would put it down to any of these things. It definitely could be a deficiency. There are various nutrients which would help to, either increase blood flow or calm the system down. But you know what? Yeah, I wouldn't put it down to pathogens usually, so I guess we could leave that one out. But even, you know what? Numerous people have had come to me who say they have headaches, not migraines, but headaches. And then I give them a recommendation to take something for their sinuses, and the headache mysteriously goes away. So even in that case, it's not always 100% clear exactly what it is. But let's say, migraines. I would look at, it could be hormones, absolutely. Taking progesterone, for instance, can get rid of headaches. Sometimes reducing serotonin can get rid of headaches. building blocks, it can be electrolyte, sodium, potassium thing, can be dehydration. So, H2O, it's another building block. Lifestyle factors, of course, stress, excess of blue light can sometimes trigger it. Definitely lack of sleep can trigger a migraine. Just had someone who actually went to a hospital because their migraine's so bad and they were told it was just lack of sleep. So yeah, I mean, migraines, and then of course, that's something that could also be resolved by a placebo effect. So yeah, that's pretty much all of them could help other than step 6, probably.
Right. Okay, that was a really good example. So yeah, going back to my earlier question, what about testing?
So once you've identified what's more likely to be the issue, right? It really depends on how much money you have available to you. Also, how much time. If it takes 4 weeks to get results back, and this is a acute issue, then that's no good, right? You need to maybe be addressing it in a different way. But if you already have if you ever done a genetic thing, then you can get results from us within a few hours. If you have never done genetic things, then it takes probably a couple of months, so that makes a big difference. But genetics are a good thing to start with, just because they're probably the cheapest per result. Just to promote our own product for a second, with Genetic Insights All Access, for less than $200, if you already have your actual raw DNA from some other ancestry service ever, then you can get, I think at the moment, oh God, is it over 500 different results, which would mean, probably over 5,000 different recommendations. There is no other test that's accurate that's going to give you anywhere near as broad a, collection of results as that. So in terms of value for money, genetics are A1. But of course, genetics are not specific, right? You're going to get similar results throughout your life. So if you're talking about, something that you've had consistently for a long time, then genetics is going to be far more likely. If you've suddenly had something that you've never had before, it may be something brief that comes and goes, then genetics, it's possible that they're less likely to be helpful in that case. So, that's a variable. With the deficiencies, it's a test that, if it's something specific, if you're having neurological issues and you think it might be B12 deficiency, you can just test for B12. But if you're generally want to see what's going on, then like a broad test of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, we talked about it before, something like a Nutrival I really like. There are other companies that do stuff that's similar-ish, but for me, that's the best value for money, plus range of results, plus accuracy of all the ones that I've tried. So I like it. And I also like the fact that it's user-friendly, that a non-practitioner is able to read the results with that company, Genova, whereas a lot of other companies, they do their results in a way that's really only meant to be read by practitioners. It's not very helpful for the layperson if you want to do it for yourself. For toxins, Nutrival gives you some idea of generally if your body is dealing with a toxic backlog, and it tests for a few different toxins, notably the 4 most common heavy metals, so that's helpful. But there's still lots of toxins being left out. So in that case, that's kind of a bit more case by case, like looking into what kind of toxins are likely to cause the problem that you're investigating, and then testing for that toxin specifically. Otherwise, you can spend, if you're trying to test for every toxin, you can spend even way more than the nutrients. You can spend maybe $500 testing for most nutrients. You can spend $5,000 trying to test for the most common toxins plus. So you really want to narrow that down, probably. In terms of testing the hormones, that's one's the easiest to do because it's the most common. Testing, as I said, there's a couple of nutrients: B12, folate, iron, and ferritin, and D3 are generally easier to test, like cheap. Sometimes you can even get your doctor to do it for free or as part of your insurance, but most of the rest you got to pay for yourself. In terms of hormones, testing cortisol, DHEA, TSH, T3 at minimum, ideally all the thyroid hormones. Testosterone, total and free, progesterone, estrogen, prolactin. Yeah, that'll be like a minimum in terms of hormones that are easy to test. Oh, and then fasting insulin as well. Not commonly tested, but because it's expensive, but definitely worth doing. Usually they test like an A1C, or over here we call it an HbA1c, which is nowhere near as useful as an insulin. It's just a lot cheaper. So I would spring for an insulin test, a fasting insulin test. I do think that's worth it. And yeah, we talked about thyroid. So yeah, that's the kind of hormones. You don't really test the most peptides and neurotransmitters. It's extremely expensive and usually not, even available. And then with pathogens, yeah, I mean, obviously that depends on where the issue is, right? But like doing a stool test, something like a biome site, which I've used before, it's very good value for money. They'll give you a very broad range and give you actually helpful information. They'll tell you, what organisms are there and what toxins they're likely to be producing, what neurotransmitters they're likely to be producing, what foods will help to bring them back into balance, all that. So they tell you a lot, again, for the amount of money it costs. But if you really want to do a better test, it's probably more like something like a GI effects, which will give you a very comprehensive overview of what's going on inside your intestines and your digestive tract. It'll tell you inflammation and your levels of short-chain fatty acids and whether you got this and whether you got that, as well as telling you all the type of pathogens that you've got inside yourself. So those would be good tests for that. I mean, just for step 7, one of the things that Joe Dispenza often talks about testing, which I think is good, is coherence. And so coherence is kind of like an anti-stress measurement. And the one that's easy to measure is like a heart rate variability. A lot of people, with like an Apple Watch or Whoop, Oura Ring, any of these kind of things, it will tell you heart rate variability like on an ongoing basis. And you can also get a device that just tests it, when you want to test it. And then, for some reason I had lab tests in my mind, but, there are other tests that are even simpler. So blood pressure is a good test to do. You can get a home blood pressure cuff that's pretty reliable for, I think, like $50, something like that. Heart rate monitor is something that you can test for, as well as oxygen saturation, little clip-on thing. You can get that for like $5, something like that. That can be interesting and useful. In terms of, for instance, if your heart rate is like 110, then you're probably not thinking very rationally, and you probably need to prioritize calming down. So there's stuff like that. There's the pH test strips that is given a lot of credence in the alternative health world. I don't think that's super helpful, but there is the urine dip test, which, again, for the price, is probably quite helpful. It will test if there's blood in the urine, if there's sugar in the urine, if there's white blood cells in the urine, stuff like that, for 20 cents per test, something like that. It's something that certainly if you have any kind of urinary kidney issues, they'll do to you if you go to an ER anyway. And even sometimes if you don't, if it's nothing to do with it, if you have something else, they'll often test that just to see what's going on. Specific gravity is another one that tells you how dehydrated or overhydrated you are. So that's a cheap, home test that you can do relatively easily. There's also something called a capnometer that measures the level of CO2 that you're breathing out.
Sorry, can you say that again? Because I didn't quite. Caplometer?
CAPNO meter. And so, we've talked before about how the level of CO2 you have is a good indicator of how well your cellular respiration is working, how well you're producing ATP. If you're producing energy in the best possible way, called oxidative phosphorylation, or the ETC, electron transport chain, then the waste products of that, byproducts of that, are CO2 and water. And so the water will show up in you, being less easily dehydrated without needing to drink water. But the more obvious thing from a testing point of view is the amount of CO2 that you're breathing out. And so it's also an indicator of stress. So the more stressed you are, the more you tend to deplete yourself of CO2. and the lower your CO2 levels will be. So can your CO2 be too high? That's a bit of a contentious point. The mainstream would say yes. Some on the fringes of optimization would say not really. You just really want that CO2 to be as high as possible. But yeah, that's another thing you can test yourself at home pretty easily. Once you have the device, I can't remember how much it is, maybe $100, $200, something like that. But that's something that you can carry on using for, many years. Okay, I think I'm out now.
Well, no, I'm
But
glad.
these are all good tests. And then there's the self-test. There's, Peter Attia, the cardiovascular expert doctor. He talks about how grip strength is like a really good indicator of overall health and vitality and longevity. Being able to do a plank. The VO2 max, which you can either just based on resting heart rate, but that is not very reliable from my mind, because it can make you seem like you're healthier than you are if you have a slow metabolism. So we talked about that before in the metabolism episode. But I think your ability to recover from it, if you do the VO2 max, which measures your ability to overcome intense exertion, that is a more helpful measurement. And VO2 max is considered to be one of the a good predictor of overall longevity. So that's another one as well.
Good comprehensive list. I love that you moving out there into other things that you can test instead of it just being lab tests. So that's really great. I mean, this has been such a comprehensive list, and so much more I know that we can go into. So before we come to a close, Elwin, do you have any other final thoughts for somebody that after they've listened to this and they may be thinking about things?
Yeah, keep watching. I would say if you're interested in deficiencies, excesses, hormones, peptides, and lifestyle factors, then we've already done episodes on those. Go and check them out. They're very much more comprehensive than what we've done here. If you're interested in the genetics of anti-aging, we're going to do that maybe next episode, or maybe we'll do it soon anyway. And then we'll do episodes on pathogens and emotions and mindset, I think, within the next few episodes as well. So keep an eye out for those.
Beautiful. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Please, I'm sure you have lots of questions like I do as they're popping up, and put them in the comments below. Let us know. And as well, if there's something that you're struggling with, ask us, and then maybe we can give some insight on where to start or what you might be struggling with, and let us know. We're here to help. And please remember to hit the like and subscribe button, the bell icon, so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. You may have noticed I recommended a few different videos in that episode, and one of the ones I recommend is just here, if you want to click there, or another one I recommend is just below, if you want to click on that one and watch that next.